Hi there, and a very warm welcome to Season 4, Episode 16 of PeopleSoup. It's Ross McIntosh here. PeopleSoupers, it's 2022. How the heck did that happen? Happy New Year.
I'm still a little bit stunned by even, just hearing your review, but hearing it from other people as well has been fabulous. There's been reviews from people who I know, from friends who have no psychological sort of training or background, and they've come across positive. My mum, actually, she texted me after she'd read it, and she's not a reader, she doesn't read books, but she read this one. There was a line in it, and she said, it's when I tell myself that I can't do something, it's just me telling myself, isn't it? And that was, I've had reviews from Ray Owen, Nick Hooper, yourself, which are just incredible to receive from, people who I respect. I think that line from my mum was just, right, okay, I've obviously hit a tone here. That's absolutely wonderful to hear. So it seems to be going all right so far.
In this episode, I continue my chat with Dr. Steve Jones, clinical psychologist, author, cartoonist and Yorkshireman, and we focus in on his brilliant book, Made Yorkshire. PeopleSoup is a 3 times award-winning podcast where we share evidence-based behavioural science in a way that's practical, accessible and fun to nourish your mind to flourish at work. You'll also hear about the conversation that sparked the creation of Steve's book, how it developed from a worksheet to a full-blown book, and the whole creative process, from motivation to doubts. It's a corker of a chat. Let's take a quick scoot over to the news desk. Reviews are in for part 1 of my chat with Steve. On Instagram, or the gram as you kids call it, Richard Coates wrote, "A brilliant episode, Steve and Ross. I spent 3 years living in Sheffield for my undergraduate degree. Lovely to hear all things Sheffield again. I'm one of those rare students who didn't stay in Sheffield then, but a piece of my heart remains there. I love Steve's journey into ACT, and I can certainly resonate with how helpful the ACT matrix is for me personally and in the work context. I related to drawing with clients, modelling vulnerability. Working with clients with neurological conditions, it has been very helpful for them to see someone struggling with drawing and the fun, flexibility and engagement this creativity brings. Thank you both for your perseverance with technology. Can't wait for part 2 and more Sheffield." Well, Richard, wait no more. Thank you so much for that review, and to all of you who have listened and shared this episode. In other news, blimey, PeopleSoupers, have I got news for you, and I'm unashamedly going to blow my own trumpet. In fact, I'm going to crank up the whole brass band. At the end of last year, that's 2021, folks, for those who are feeling a bit discombobulated, Chris Winson published his list of resources that he's found really useful over the year. And I'm proud, humbled and overwhelmed to say that PeopleSoup was given the Best Podcast Award for the 3rd year running. Blimey, folks, it's such an honour to receive this, particularly alongside such great company, including my friends at Psychologists Off the Clock, Ask the Therapist with Sarah Rees, Pause Purpose Play with Michaela Thomas, and Playing It Safe with Patricia Zurita Ona, our very own Dr. Z. And the Chizzy Best New Podcast Award went to the fabulous Hayley Quinn and her podcast Welcome to Self. As Chris said, I love it when someone I know tries something new, with all the anxiety and stress that can bring. And it is especially lovely when it turns out brilliantly. And yes, I am biased having been a guest, but it's a wonderful series and I hope Hayley is proud of what she has achieved this year. Hear from me, and I recommend that you check out Welcome to Self and all of these great shows. Add them to your podcast library, folks. There's so many nuggets, insights and voices from all of these nominees. Here's what Chris said about PeopleSoup. Without a doubt, it has to be a repeat award win for the ever-wonderful PeopleSoup with Ross McIntosh. Ross produces a brilliant show full of his own personal sharing and with some super guests, all presented full of warm and gentle humour. If you are not a PeopleSouper, you don't know what you're missing. Well, thank you so much for those warm and kind words, Chris. It really does mean the world. Chris went on to cover 2 special awards, which are also very relevant and meaningful to me and the show. So I'll read out Chris's words. Each year I have awarded the Chizzy Compassionate Inspiration Award, often to someone who may not be well known or doesn't feature in the other awards, but who has inspired me. It could have been a repeat award for Rose Horton-Smith, here from me, who has been a constant support to many of us again this year. The winner of the 2021 Chizzy Compassionate Inspiration is a man who has been inspired by loss, by the grief of others, and challenged himself through miles and miles of walking to raise money for related charities, all with gentle humour in a quiet and unassuming way. The 2021 Chizzy Compassionate Inspiration is Gordon McIntosh, also known as Big G. Thank you, Gordon. In dark days you have been a light and made a huge difference through the amazing fundraising you have done. And Ross, it's about time Big G had his own podcast. Well, Chris, watch this space because there will be another episode landing with Big G quite soon. Chris goes on to say, the last award is a new one I am introducing this year, and it is touched by sadness. I have decided to create a new award, not a Chizzy, but rather the Louise Gardner Award, in honour of our friend Lou, who passed away this year. And it's going to be given to people who do what she did, make helpful information about looking after ourselves and our mental well-being available and accessible to other people in simple, understandable formats. To be able to do so in a way which is informative and engaging is not easy, although she made it look like it was, and the winner does too. The first Louise Gardner Award goes to Ross McIntosh for his work on PeopleSoup, his ability to share ACT concepts so well, and with the sole objective of helping others. The podcast featured Lou in 2 episodes during 2020, and the ability to listen to those again has been a gift. Ross, keep doing what you do and being what you are, a lovely, caring human. Flippin' heck, folks. I'm sincerely so humbled and moved and proud. I love doing this podcast, chatting with my fabulous guests, and hopefully making something that's entertaining and useful. To receive these awards is an absolute honour. Thank you, Chris. And Dad was also flabbergasted to receive the Compassionate Inspiration Award. I read out Chris's words to him and we both had a bit of a cry and felt uplifted as well. I'd like to thank Chris for building and nurturing such a fabulous community where I've learnt loads and also made some great friends. To check out and join the community, check out the hashtag 365 Days of Compassion on social media. All the links are in the show notes, folks. For now, get a brew on and have a listen to part 2 of my chat with the wonderful Steve Jones. Steve, I'd like to move on to your book, ACT Made Yorkshire. That's ACT Made Yorkshire, PeopleSoupers. If you want to get out there and buy it, I would highly recommend it. So we're going to have a bit of a chat about the book now, Steve. And I want to start with my review, which I haven't shared with you, which may seem a little bit cruel, but I'd just like to get your initial reaction.
I can feel it on the back of my neck. But I don't think public evisceration's high up on this particular podcast.
No, we're a kind group here. So, here we go. Steve has created a tremendously useful book, and in doing so he's making practical evidence-based skills more accessible, useful and fun to a wider audience. And these are truly skills for life, which I think really comes across in the book. He writes in a conversational Yorkshire vernacular in a tone that is warm and friendly, with a good dose of Yorkshire straightforwardness. For me, he brings the ACT processes to life through his words, his own cartoons, and through using 2 stunt doubles, Bob and Jane, to illustrate the skills and their impact in different types of lives. It's packed full of nuggets, insights and exercises, and with chapter titles like Exaflex, What's the Catch? Why's my mind such an arse? I like big butts and I cannot lie. There's a hell of a lot to love in this book, folks. I couldn't recommend it more highly. I love it, and thank you for writing it, Steve. Absolutely hats off to you.
Wow. Wow, thank you very much.
I just made the bold assumption there that the cartoons were yours.
They are.
Phew.
Yep.
I love them, and I just thought, I just read that out, and I thought, I didn't check with you. But
yeah, they're mine.
So not only are the words yours, the cartoons are yours too. So it's a labour of love, this, Steve. Tell me about how it was born.
So the thing that I mentioned about going up to the ACBS conference, so I went up with my then supervisor, Nick Wilkinson, and we were watching the follies, so people getting up, embracing their own discomfort and performing in front of other colleagues. And we were sat at the back. We might have had 1 or 2 drinks by this point, potentially. And we were watching it, and we had a bit of a joke about, well, can you imagine if I just went up, I really ham my accent up, as I know it doesn't need much, but as high as I can make it, put a flat cap on, I'll have a little toy greyhound, and Nick could be the therapist, just asking me all these things, and I'd just sit there and say, that'd be right then, wouldn't it? You're telling me to crack on? All right, yeah. That's about right, that. And just really, really go for it. And we just had a bit of a joke and a bit of a laugh about it. But then it just sort of sat for a while. And then just before lockdown, we knew that there was going to be a lot of times when you couldn't go out, things like that. So I said I'll make a little Act Yorkshire worksheet, just as a bit of a spoof, a bit of tongue-in-cheek, a bit of a joke, which is where the title obviously comes from. I'm taking from people's fabulous work before me, I'm fully aware. But when I started to do it, I realised, I could add this in. I could add this in. I could add this in. And then suddenly I realised that I was about 10,000 words in. This isn't a fact sheet anymore, is it? This has probably gone a bit further. And then it just sort of grew from there, really. And I asked people to take a look at it, to read it, just getting bits and pieces. And then it just took its own path. And I spoke to people who really, really respect. So people like Nick Hooper took time out of his diary to actually do a video call with me to talk about publishing and how to navigate that process, because I have no idea at all. And then people like Ray Owen said, actually, this is a good idea. I like this. Oh, okay, maybe there is just some merit in this. I'll give it a go and see what happens. And the issue with it is, because it is so niche, big publishers wouldn't go for it, but then smaller ones, it was too specialist in terms of its self-help nature. So I ended up just going, right, okay, I'll self-publish it. I'll go through the whatever people think of Amazon and just sort of, I'll just do that. I'll put it out into the world and see what happens with it. And that's essentially where it ended up. Now it's sat in my hands and I'm talking to wonderful people like yourself. I'm like, how did this happen? From what was a fact sheet or a couple of drinks at a conference? I don't know how this happened.
Oh, it's beautiful to hear the evolution of it. I love that, from the follies to a product, man.
The imposter syndrome is very real. I'm not going to lie.
But what was that process like of realising you got to 10,000 words and then continuing? Were your own passengers showing up?
Yeah, very much so. They were quite loud. So there was lots of things. Just pack it in. Go on PlayStation. Just chill out for a bit. There's a lot going on at the minute. And this is all in the context. My son is now 2. So when I started this, he was just turned 1. So probably not the greatest time to take on a project like this. But it really helps, because normally when I have a lot of spare time, I end up drawing a lot. So that's how I can always tell if I'm feeling a bit stressed or under pressure. My art production goes through the roof, whereas it didn't throughout this. And I think it's because my head was in this, and it was sort of the in for a penny, in for a pound, let's just do it and see what happens. I think there's something about your own values as well, sort of put your money where your mouth is type of approach. I've always said I always want to write a book, and I've always meant I want to write a novel, like a fantasy book like the ones that I've grown up reading and that I love, and I couldn't have written anything further away from it if I'd have tried.
Wow, well look, there's still time for that one.
Oh, that's in the back. I think if I opened my laptop and started to write in my own time, my wife might throw the laptop or me out of the house.
I hear you. And is there a way you'd introduce this book to a new audience?
I struggle with this a lot. People keep asking me this question, and it's a fabulous question to be asked. I think I want to take something that I know works, that I've seen work, and that we have not just my own personal experience, but there is evidence. It shows that this stuff really can connect with people. But I also know that psychology and psychologists can often be seen as other. You're different. You're not like us. Part of that is justified. we do like to hide behind words and concepts. And I use the word hide, and I realise that's got a tone to it. But I genuinely do believe we do sometimes. It's comfortable, and it makes sense that we do. But at the same time, this is a book for me as an 18, 19-year-old. So before I know what I know now, I've tried to write it for me then, if that makes sense. So I really should have led with that as my pitch. I've written a book for me before I know what I know now.
And I'd really like to work out how we can convey a sense of its utility, because I believe it's tremendously useful. Is there a way we could do that in relation to the workplace, do you think?
I think so, because the stuff that we're talking about is universal, isn't it? We all have thoughts, we all have experiences, and we all have contexts that are constantly shifting. And work is a huge amount of our lives. Especially at the moment, work is changing incredibly rapidly. And I remember listening not too long ago about the research that a colleague had done in sort of virtual safety in team working. And just hearing that just rung so many bells in my head from my own experience. But we're talking about actually ACT as a way to create and to foster that safety in line with what is important to you, but also what is important to you as an organisation as well. Because often when you're in organisations, when you're sent, and I'll use that word, sent for sort of away days or things like that, it is presented in a way that doesn't feel familiar. What I try to do is to make it as familiar as I can. Granted, some of it's a bit tongue-in-cheek, and it's, deliberately stereotypes based on me. But I think there is something about, I've tried to write this in a way that is accessible straight off the bat. You don't have to do prior reading to be able to pick this up. And I think that's something about how we communicate with people is vital to working in organisations and its utility. And I think, as you've already alluded to, Bob and Jane, and they're semi-constructed people who are case examples in the book who are going through their own lives, and you can see how ACT can be applied directly to their experiences to try and make their lives richer. And they're individuals. They aren't exact replicas of people, they aren't direct correlates, but all the features within them are from people I know or I've encountered in my life. So the fact that I think it can be applied to them means that I think it can be applied to anyone.
Well, just so you know, I've started to add it to my list of resources in work I do in the workplace, because I think it really hits the nail on the head. Because if you think about the workplace, we're seeing what you've described earlier, people who like to work face to face and who can't and are trying to sketch and hold drawings up to a camera. But we're seeing people who are finding it difficult to disconnect from work. I'm seeing lots of big rise in anxiety in the workplace. And I mean the workplace in the widest sense. The workplace could be moving from your bedroom to the kitchen to go to work because you're working from home. But there's lots of anxiety about going into the next phase of the pandemic and possibly a hybrid approach. I think there's so many applications and how it can apply to humanity. And I think that's what you really capture. This is so practical. Read it and you'll find it useful. It's kind of what I want to shout from the rooftops in Sheffield and other areas of Yorkshire.
That's really kind, and it's lovely. Because I'm sat here as we're recording in my upstairs, in my attic, on a desk that I bought just as the pandemic, well, not ended, but the lockdowns ended. I'd spent the best part of 10, 11 months sat on the emergency chairs that are talked about around a dining room table. I was on that for 10 minutes. I thought, it'll be over soon. Very naive. I'm now very aware. But even that, to invest in this type of, it's not just a little table and a little chair, but even that you think, well, actually, can everyone do that? That's talking from a position of privilege to be able to do that. If that was in my head of, I need to do this now for my health, if I couldn't do that, what would I be thinking? Am I still working sort of propped on the edge of a bed, noticing that my spine is bending ever so further forward all the time to compensate? So health benefits, but if I'm in pain, how's that going to affect how I want to work? Am I going to be as engaged? Am I going to care as much? And all of that takes away from your overall vitality, doesn't it?
I think as children, maybe your son will be fortunate, I hope so, but he will know about skills, like ACT type skills, at school, or probably before school from you. But I wasn't taught these types of skills in school. And I think reaching more adults with these in a way that's entertaining and interesting and accessible is the key.
And this is very localised. I could have turned it into Act Made Northern, because I've had so many people who've said, I know someone who's from up near Newcastle, said, oh, that's just like my granddad. That's just what he did. Whereas that's exactly based... So the cartoons, the doodles in there are all based on Roy, my granddad, who I love dearly. But people from Newcastle, oh, that's exactly what mine did. I recognise that. And I could have done that, and I think there's a way that we can localise everything that we do, because essentially we convey the message to the people who we work with. We don't get them to understand what we're saying. The onus is on us, isn't it, as therapists or professionals, to either translate it or to adapt it into what works for people.
So it's adapted to the Yorkshire context. Being a Northumbrian, I really relate to it and can identify with the characters, absolutely. And I think it's written in such a way that people will have fondness for it wherever they're from, and the curiosity.
If it means people end up Googling things like hendos, or I can imagine from, what is a dog track? What does he mean? and you get trekked to the glorious interior decor of a greyhound racing track, then just know that makes me happy.
I think it's, oh my God, do you realise, Steve, in the future people will be doing their dissertations about the cultural impact of your book, how it provided this cultural snapshot of a moment in time in Yorkshire/Sheffield.
Yeah, my mind boggles.
And how's it been received?
Well, it's been lovely to hear. I'm still a little bit stunned by even, just hearing your review, but hearing it from other people as well has been fabulous. There's been reviews from people who I know, from friends who have no psychological sort of training or background, and they've come across positive. My mum, actually, she texted me after she'd read it, and she's not a reader, she doesn't read books, but she read this one. There was a line in it, and she said, oh, it's when I tell myself that I can't do something, it's just me telling myself, isn't it? And that was, I've had reviews from Ray Owen, Nick Hooper, yourself, which are just incredible to receive from, people who I respect. I think that line from my mum was just, right, okay, I've obviously hit a tone here. That's absolutely wonderful to hear. So it seems to be going all right so far.
Great. And yeah, I love that. Yeah, that gives me goosebumps again, that understated summary from your mum. It feels like a penny drop moment for her.
One thing that I was thinking of when I saw that, I obviously talk about what I do for a living, and I talk about sort of what I've learned and things like that to my mum in conversation. And despite have all those conversations, having read that is the thing that's got that response. So I think there's something about when you're reading, it's something so much more powerful than someone telling you or someone taking you through it. The family relationship means that I could say what I want, and people like my mum and wife will just look at me and, it's Steve. He's got his work mode on at the minute, ignore him for the next 20 minutes and he'll come back.
Nice. And were there any moments during the writing or the getting through the publishing jungle that you thought, I'm not sure this is going to happen?
Yeah. Many of those. Because when I got quite a few emails that were, very kind and very nice back from people, from editors or publishers saying, sorry, this is not something we can do. And I just got to the point, actually, I don't think this is going to work. And then it was my friend Ian who mentioned, why don't you try this Kindle Direct publishing thing, see what that's like. And I'd looked at it, this is going to take forever, isn't it? Shall I just put it as a PDF and throw it out and see what happens, or do I just stick with it? And then I went through it and I was looking, okay, so you have to price it. That feels awkward, which was incredibly awkward when I looked through other people's work. I'm like, oh, am I pricing myself at the same band as people like Stephen Hayes? Or that can't be right, surely. And then making a cover and doing things like that because no one else is around to do it. So everything in it is mine. I thought, yeah, that looks like what I think I represent. Okay. And then I hovered over the publish button for ages.
Oh.
That, really? Do you want to commit to this? What happens if this goes a bit wonky? Or people read it and go, oh, and you thought you knew what act was? And it was terrifying, I'm not going to lie. But I just thought, well, you know what? If that happens, okay, you took a swing, and I'd rather look back and regret things that I have done than regret not having done something. So I just, right, take a swing, see what happens. Hit submit, and then panic.
When was it you hit submit? It was earlier this year, wasn't it?
Yeah, so it was about 3 months. It was start of September, I think it came out.
Wow.
So it's an infant.
And so it's available on Kindle.
Yep.
And people can get a hard copy as well, is that right?
Yeah, so everything's on Amazon. It's all on the same link, whether it's Kindle or the paperback copy. I think if you've got Kindle Unlimited, it's free. I don't want to sound like a sales rep for Amazon. I have toyed with the idea of wanting to make it an audiobook, but I don't have the expertise to do that, and Sean Bean won't get back to me.
Who needs Sean Bean, mate? Listen to your own voice. Because you've got exercises associated. In your generosity, there's some of the exercises brought to life on SoundCloud too.
Yeah, that was an interesting process. That's probably what's putting me off of wanting to do the full audiobook version, I think.
So that's great to hear about the Amazon process. So just purely curiosity on my part, I've got a copy of the book, but if I went and ordered a hard copy, do you have to then set up your printing press and...
No, thankfully not. No.
How does that work?
Magic? I think they basically just do it regionally. So my uncle's took some into his workplace in Australia, and he just went on Amazon Australia, clicked I want 3 copies, and they just print them on demand. I talked to a few publishers, yeah, right, it costs this much because you'll need this many printing up front. I have no idea if this will sell 1 copy, so I don't have the resource or the ability to do that, whereas these do it on demand. So as soon as someone clicks it, I can see, 2 have sold in Canada and 1 sold in France. How is this happening? But it is, which is bizarre.
Oh, well, I'm delighted to hear that. Congratulations. I think it deserves every success. And I'd love to hear what PeopleSoup think about it. So PeopleSoup, if you have a read of it, I'll make sure you have Steve's contact details to give him a shout so you can feed back directly to him. And what next? Is there a follow-up book?
Not for a while. I think is the safe answer, because I think my wife might listen to this. So not for a while, I'll say. I have toyed with the idea of, if there are other little metaphors and other little bits that I could add in. So nothing substantial, but just to make it a bit more full and a bit more embellished. And I might do a little sort of second helpings type thing. I don't know what to do, is my answer. Who knows?
Well, mate, I think you can give yourself a bit of a rest now.
That's probably wise.
Some sketching to get the creativity going. And it's like when my dad, well, I do too, when my mum used to make these Sunday roast, and we'd have Yorkshire pudding with the Sunday roast.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'd have it for pudding as well, with golden syrup on.
Yep.
Yorkshire pudding. Except my dad calls golden syrup treacle.
Yep.
I'm not sure why.
Yeah, I get that. My mum does that as well, because it comes in the same Lions tin, the old tin, so it's, right, that's what it is.
Okay. Never really got to the bottom of that. But Steve, would you have a takeaway for our PeopleSoupers? Is there a core, simple, perhaps Yorkshire-themed takeaway for our listeners?
I think that we can communicate, and I'm talking as psychologists here, we can offer something to the people that we work with in a way that works for them. And I think sometimes we offer it in a way that works for us. And I think that's probably my main thing of doing this, and to take a shot is the thing. Because I found that from a throwaway conversation about 18 months ago, that I'm now sat here on this podcast with this, this fabulous opportunity, and being able to talk to people such as yourself. I'm saying, hey, how did that happen? And it all came from that little ember. One thing I remember writing the Serenity Prayer in Yorkshire, which made me smile, which I could read out as a bit of a final, this is my main takeaway. I think it'll be a beautiful way to end. So I think I will say thank you now, Steve. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me. We were scheduled 3 times, folks, and Steve had the patience in this
Talking about serenity, this air of calm, because last time we were speaking, I had no power and it was via a mobile hotspot and via the torchlight of my other mobile. But Steve just had this gentle air of calmness about him. So I think it's perfect to finish on the Yorkshire version of the Serenity Prayer.
Thank you. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen. So learn to see wood-foot trees while you're here now. Seeing difference between you and your stuff. Knowing what matters and moving forwards 1 foot in front of the other. Thank you.
Steve, thank you so much. It's been an absolute joy to talk to you, and we will catch up soon.
Thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
That's it, part 2 in the bag, folks. Thank you so much to Steve for being such a fabulous guest. You can grab his book via the link in the show notes, and you'll also find a link to the exercises on SoundCloud. If you like this episode of the podcast, could I invite you to share it with one other person? I'm really keen to spread the behavioural science and skills with more people. Of course, a subscription, follow, rating or review are also very much appreciated. The show notes are at rossmcintosh.co.uk, and this includes links to a few different platforms. PeopleSoupers, I love to hear from you, and you can get in touch at peoplesoup.pod@gmail.com. On Twitter, we are at PeopleSoupPod. On Instagram at people.soup, and on Facebook at PeopleSoupPod. Thanks to Andy Glenn for his spoon magic and Alex Engelberg for his vocals. Most of all, dear listener, thanks to you. Look after yourselves, PeopleSoupers, and bye for now. Where hast thou been since I saw thee? I saw thee on Ilkley Moor Bartat. Where hast thou been since I saw thee? I saw thee. Where hast thou been since I saw thee? On Ilkley Moor Bartat, Bartat, on Ilkley Moor Bartat, on Ilkley Moor Bartat, where the lads play football.